All right, guys, so today we're gonna talk about the bench. Steps to getting a perfect bench press. I'm gonna give you two different ways in which to approach it, right? My personal favorite's gonna come second, but we're gonna walk through how most people tend to get set up for their bench press. Step number one is gonna be establishing foot position, right? Even though, yes, bench is all about that upper body, all about those chest muscles, we wanna consider the fact that with our leg position, when we anchor these bad boys to the floor, we can now create leg drive because all of us want a bigger bench. But if we don't utilize these big, strong leg muscles, our bench is probably gonna be a little lackluster, right? So by establishing a foot position, like she is here, we can now take ourselves where she's gonna move her hips down the bench. So she started out right in the middle. She's gonna leave her feet exactly where they are. Like I mentioned, these are anchored positions for your feet. We want to use this position to create tension, all right? So she's gonna move herself down the bench, and now she's gonna lay back. Now, Gabby's pretty good at arching. I am not. What can individuals like myself who aren't great at arching do? Well, they're gonna have to play with foot position, guys. So for each individual person out there are nuanced details as far as how far I would position my feet in and out, depending on your flexibility, your ability to arch, etc. Okay? So for her, she's found her sweet position where her knees are at a nice, I would say about a 90-degree angle. It doesn't have to be much shorter than that, but she can feel tension with her quads. From there, she's gonna use either the bar or the sides of the rack to push her shoulders down the bench. Now, what we wanna do when we use the bar to push her shoulders down the bench is we're gonna push the bar into the J-cup. Yep, and we're gonna try to depress the shoulder blades, raising the sternum, that contact point that we have for the bar, just about as high as possible. The more tension we can create in the posterior chain, the more power she can produce. You can't create force without stability. So that's all we're doing. We're creating more stability so we can deliver more force. So when she pushes her shoulders down, lifting her sternum nice and tall, she's actively flexing her posterior chain. So her back muscles are flexed. I know she's getting tired just holding this position, right? Now from here, when we establish our grip width, which is one of the fourth or fifth steps in our chain, we want to think about the fact that the closer our hands are in proximity to our midsection, the more power you can deliver. The further your hands are out, the more efficient the lift tends to be because you're essentially reducing the distance the bar has to travel. So what, again, you need to do is play around with different hand positions to determine what might be best for you if you're looking for the strongest bench position as far as grip goes. So what we're gonna do for Gabby is we're just gonna put our pinkies on the ring. We're gonna go with that. That's her strongest position. So from here, she's gonna twist the bar just a little bit, and she's gonna pick the bar. And then from here, I recommend that we take a breath now into the chest. This gets the rib cage nice and rigid and fixed. And with benching, we wanna think about joint stacking. So let's talk about joint stacking. What does that mean? That means keeping your wrist over your elbows and your elbows over your shoulders in the initial starting position. Now, when we go down to make contact with the chest, we wanna keep in mind that the wrists need to stay nice and stacked over the elbow joint. So she's gonna bring the bar down to her chest, somewhere just below the nipple line. Bottom of your sternum is usually the most comfortable and most likely gonna be the best position for your elbows. Go ahead and bring it to your chest. Good. So now you can see here the elbows are still nice and underneath the wrist because with the bench press, we want to consider the fact that the triceps are such a big driver for this lift, okay? And now she's going to go ahead and push into full extension. So when it comes to setting up from the front, it's all about establishing foot position first and then using the bar or the rack as leverage to push your shoulders down to create that posterior tension, right? When it comes to setting up from the back, which is my personal favorite, I find that these steps can be a lot easier. So what Gabby's gonna do first is she's gonna establish that grip, right? So now that the grip is set, she's gonna go ahead and sit at the top of the bench. Good. And then from here, what I want her to do is I want her to extend her feet straight out in front of her. What this does is she's going to anchor her feet just like in the initial setup where her feet are now stuck to the floor. And she's gonna use this bar for a little leverage to bring herself up and under the bar to position her hips down the bench and push her shoulders down the bench to create her arch. So Gabby, go ahead and pull yourself by leaning back and pulling up and under and pushing onto the bar. And then now we've gotten into full extension. So you can see that that was a really nice fluid movement for her, where she was easy into position, her feet never moved, she has tension on her quads, she's flexing her posterior chain muscles, and she's keeping her wrists nice and stacked over her joints. From here, she can go ahead and pick the bar, and then just like I said, we're gonna keep the wrists over the elbows, elbows over the shoulders in the starting position, and then she's gonna bring it to her chest, keeping her wrists over her elbows again, and then go ahead and press. Good. And that is joint stacking, and that's how we set up from the back.